Good morning. Breathing. The most fundamental movement. Well, yes, we have several pulses. We have a cranial pulse. We have a respirational pulse that we call breath. We have the pulse of our circulatory system. Rhythmic movement is our most fundamental inner language. Some would say, I think I've heard some physicists say that it's sort of the thing that creates it's the basic building block of like time and space. You need to have movement and time for space to sort of have any meaning for it to know itself, if you will. If you're not moving, how do you know what's where anything is? And if you're moving, how fast? How long does it take to get from here to there? Anyway, those are larger thoughts. I'm focusing on our living experience. There's so many schools of thought, so many ways that people say you should breathe, you should belly breathe, you should do this, you should do that, breathe slow, breathe fast. Honestly, my firm belief is that we shouldn't should our breathing at all. Breathing is something to observe. It can be useful occasionally for training purposes to work with restricting breathing, holding breathing, doing certain breathing patterns. But it's so important to remember that that is a training tool and not a habit to create. I believe for me, the practice of breathing is the most fundamental acknowledgement that my ego and my conscious awareness is not my being, that I am watching the most fundamental parts of myself. The thinking does not encompass the living. And I've certainly heard enough people with personal knowledge talk about how often our true self and gifts, when they arrive, can feel like they come from somewhere else because they come from outside the ego. So I enjoy watching the breathing. And if it's useful, physical practice, if you will. Letting each breath, knowing that each breath needs to be unique. Letting each breath be as it is, the size, the shape. Every breath has a shape, often slightly different. But we will each have our own shapes that we're habitually breathing in. Where does the air go? Where doesn't it go? And the main, if we have a job to give ourselves with breathing, it's to get out of the way. That wherever that sensation of breathing appears, I want to relax. Whether it makes sense physiologically or not, whether it's in the lungs or not, I am going to relax wherever I feel breath touching me inside. And get out of the way. And let it expand. And And that expansion and condensing, I don't like to say contraction because it doesn't involve tension to come together. Actually, I believe both phases of breath are riding a natural pulse. I'll talk about that in a minute. Both phases arise on their own. There may be pauses in between, they have their own rhythm. It's all good. It's like I'm waiting to see what my breath wants to do. And after I've done that for a while, I realize that it's like it's catching a ride on something. I'm not deciding to inhale and then contracting certain muscles. The inhale happens eventually. The body wants to breathe. And that basic pulsation isn't just a property of our breathing, it's a property of our nervous system too. That our attention, our body, expands and condenses. We have a hardwired awareness of space. According to our nervous systems, we, if you want to define we as the part I, if you want to define what my body is by what I have wired in my nervous system, my body's actually a sphere larger than what I can reach with my limbs, because we have built-in nerve cells that track what's around us. There's some great resources about it, but there's a lot of different names for it. I learned the word kinesphere, and I'll talk more about that in another one. But the breath, it's about catching a ride on this natural sort of wave-like cycle of the space we're in. If I relax and allow myself to breathe, the inhale happens, the exhale happens. I don't really feel like I'm doing anything. And if I don't anchor my attention too much with my thinking to, I am paying attention to my breathing and only this here, then even just physically, the things on the outside of the lungs start to expand and contract, soften, sort of explore space, if you will. And that feeling keeps growing, until that function, that basic pulsing function, becomes all that's happening. It's not about muscular action. It's not about any of that other stuff. All of that is learned behavior based on an analytical story that our culture carries about bodies and physiology, chemistry inside, all that stuff. And while it may not be false, it is definitely not complete, because the way that a body functions when our basic rhythms are held by our awareness in this way is totally different. I have much personal first-hand experience with that. Things that seem ridiculous or impossible happen. So breathing is not some physical job to do, some exercise to get good at, a skill to refine. It's a door into some of our most basic rhythmic nature. It is a door into a physical experience of the moment and a physical template. That experience is a template for moving with and through this space that we're in, that allows us to maintain our connection with ourselves and the world in a much deeper way as we live our lives in bodies, doing physical things and mental things and, doing stuff, living. I have found that to be the door, because it's so simple and so physical and so completely connected when we look at the larger picture of what it really is. And I'll talk more in other videos about the nature of space, about the kinesphere. Those are very useful. But something a little different about breathing.